Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final Opening Round Series is tonight at the UBS Arena. We'll talk about some potential line changes and lineup changes for both teams. Plus, we look at an Islanders player who has quietly been very effective and stepped up his game, and another who needs to do just that. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
You're Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Friday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to thank everyone for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and on your podcatcher of choice so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. We have got a lot to get to on today's show, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to talk about on a future show, feel free to send us an email. The email address, lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever it is that's on your mind. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on Twitter at Ice Wars, NYRVSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings, and I am live tweeting during every Islanders home and road playoff game. So join me for some instant insight and analysis, and it's always great to talk a little Islanders hockey, game time, or anytime. Now, don't forget, tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern time, Islanders and Hurricanes, Game 6. You can catch every moment of this playoff game with an Islanders hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Islanders. All right, lots to discuss, and I want to start off discussing potentially what could be a very big change in the lineup for the Carolina Hurricanes. And that goes back to Thursday's practice, where goaltender Frederik Andersen, who has not played yet in this series and wasn't even the backup for the games 2, 3, and 4 due to an injury, he was getting the starters' workload at practice yesterday for the Carolina Hurricanes, which usually means that he's going to get the start in Game 6. So Rod Brind'Amour, the coach of the Hurricanes, either throwing the Islanders a curveball by giving Andersen the starter role in practice yesterday, or he is going to make that move. Now, Andersen, 33 years old, and statistically, he was the person who started and won the most games this year for the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, Antti Raanta was statistically stronger with a better goals against average, a better save percentage, more shutouts. But Andersen has a little more experience. He had more wins. 33 starts, 34 games this past season for Andersen. He was 21, 11, and 1. He had a 2.48 goals against average and a 903 save percentage. And, Brind'Amour, look, all NHL coaches tend to be a little bit cryptic about things during the playoffs. They're not going to necessarily give you a straight story. But here's what Rod Brind'Amour had to say when asked whether or not having Andersen be the starter in practice means he's starting Game 6. He said, yep, there's a chance. He's definitely, like we said earlier, there was no chance, but he's definitely right there now. And they asked Andersen at practice on Thursday whether he was feeling 100%, and he said, I'm on the ice, so yeah. And Anderson did admit originally, and again, this is all the playoff gamesmanship. Originally, it was basically, they said he had an illness, and that's why he was unavailable for games 2, 3, and 4. Well, now they're admitting that it was indeed an injury. And look, the Islanders have faced Frederik Andersen 3 times this year. And in the first meeting, which was back in October, the Islanders got 5 goals in that game, won it handily, played probably one of their better games of the season. But then in the other 2 games, Andersen stopped 50 out of the 53 shots he faced. Again, the number of shots, that's 53 shots total over 2 games, tells you how well the Hurricanes played in front of him. Now, Lane Lambert, for his part, at Islanders practice, indicates that he doesn't think it matters who the Carolina Hurricanes end up playing in goal. He said, I don't think it changes anything for us, regardless of who they play. We have to play our game and do things offensively that we need to do to give ourselves the best chance to score. And I have to agree 100% with Lane Lambert's take on that. Whether or not it's Anderson or Ranta or, any other goalie. I mean, Carolina had played Pyotr Kochetkov he started 23 games over the course of the season. All 3 goalie statistics relatively in the same ballpark, although Ranta statistically was the best. His record 19-3 and 3, the 2.23 goals against average, the 9.10 save percentage. So we may very well see Frederik Andersen. And the good thing about that, I guess, from an Islanders perspective, yeah, Anderson may be healthy again, but how ready is he? How in the zone is he going to be? Is he going to be sharp coming off the fact that, for the last week plus, maybe week and a half, almost 2 weeks, he hasn't played a regular season or playoff game? It's a very different situation saying, yeah, the guy practiced yesterday. We've seen that with Matthew Barzal and, for the Islanders and with Alexander Romanov. Yeah, you come back and you play, and certainly having, a guy like Barzal at 75, 80, 85% is better for your team than having, your 13th best forward at 95%. But in this case, is a slightly rusty Frederik Andersen better than Antti Ranta for the Carolina Hurricanes? Now, obviously, if Anderson does not play well in Game 6, you have the right to go back to Ranta or Kochetkov for Game 7. But clearly, Antti Ranta, the Hurricanes, not exactly thrilled with what he's given them. And the Islanders may very well be facing Frederik Andersen for the first time in this series tonight in Game 6. And as soon as we know something official, we will let you know on our Twitter feed. So that is the first big piece of news coming out of both teams' practices on Thursday. And, changing goalies is a big deal when it comes to, outcomes of the series. We know how important goaltending is. Now we have to see whether or not Rod Brind'Amour is playing mind games or whether he really does end up following up and making this change in between the pipes. All right, we've got a lot more to get to. We'll talk about some possible line combination changes that Lane Lambert discussed in practice on Thursday. We'll also talk about an Islanders player who has quietly improved his game in the playoffs and another Islander player who needs to do it. We've got all that and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, available only to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So Lane Lambert at practice yesterday on Thursday also asked about some of the moves that he made late in the game, uh, game 5 in Carolina. And the question really became whether or not he was going to continue to shuffle his lines up. And we talked a little bit about this on the show after game 5, that all of a sudden we saw Bo Horvat playing on the line with Hudson Fasching and Zach Parise, while J.G. Pageau moved up with Matthew Barzal and Anders Lee. That allowed Lambert to keep the second line, the Nelson, Engvall, Palmieri line, which remains the only line the Islanders have that has been consistently productive offensively throughout the course of this series. They were able to be kept together, and obviously the identity line was able to stick together. Now, here's the thing that's different tonight as opposed to Tuesday night. Tuesday night in Carolina, Rod Brind'Amour and the Hurricanes had the last change. Now, by separating Barzal and Horvat, part of the reason for that is that Lane Lambert was trying to figure out Jordan Staal is the guy who is on the checking line. It's the Staal Nason fast line. That's the checking line for the Carolina Hurricanes. And if you separate Horvat and Barzal, Jordan Staal can't be out there against both, and Brind'Amour has to make a choice. Now, the Islanders have the last change tonight at UBS Arena, and Lane Lambert basically being non-committal at practice as to whether or not he's going to go back to the original, having Horvat, Barzal, and Lee on a line, and then the third line being Pageau, Palmieri, and Parise, or whether he'll stick with the changes that he made later on in game 5. Lambert said, "We'll see what happens. I didn't mind the combinations, let's put it that way, but we'll see what happens." And, obviously, I think Lane Lambert tends to mix things up when the team is not producing offensively and they're trying to get, more goals. He will, try to mix things up in order to make sure that the team maybe can find that little extra edge and get a little bit more quality scoring chances. It doesn't always work, but that is something he has been known to do mid-game on multiple occasions. So what we see when the puck drops at the beginning of the game may not necessarily be what we see at the end of the game. And I would not be surprised to see Lane Lambert start with the new combinations and go back to the old, or start with the old and go back to the new. Bottom line is, either way, it has to produce some offense. I like the idea of separating Horvat and Barzal only because it puts Rod Brind'Amour in a little bit of a conundrum. Who is he going to put Stahl's line out there? They stuck with Stahl on Barzal for the most part in game 5. It'll be interesting to see how they approach it if the Islanders go back to that. in Game 6. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of players who have affected the Islanders. One who has quietly picked up his game in the playoffs, and one that the Islanders need to pick up their game in the playoffs. And I am hoping that we see a little bit more from the second player. But the first player, the guy who really has picked up his game, is Ryan Pollock. Pollock really has been a difference maker. He has 26 hits so far in the series, including 9 in Game 1. And he really has done a good job. We talked about the hits. He also has 13 block shots in the series so far. That leads the Islanders. And Lane Lambert at practice Thursday, when asked about Pollock, he said he's very invested. Some of the best hockey I've seen him play. He's doing things that he has to do with a lot of commitment. And he basically said that that big hit that Pollock delivered at the beginning of Game 1, really in the first, 30, 40 seconds, set the tone. He said everybody else has been following suit. So Pollock really out there and doing the things that he needs to do in the playoffs that help the Islanders wear down the Carolina Hurricanes and get the job done. It is indeed big. And then the other thing about Pollock, he has a goal and 3 points in 5 games. That ties him with Scott Mayfield for the most among Islanders defensemen, and it places him third on the team, or tied for third overall with 3 points through 5 games. Only Brock Nelson and Kyle Palmieri currently have more. All right, we have got more to discuss on this episode of the show. We'll talk about a player who needs to pick up his game, who has been a little bit of a disappointment thus far in the playoffs. We'll also have our final thoughts and our Islanders birthday of the day. We've got all that and more still to come on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Don't forget Game 6 of this series coming tonight at the UBS Arena, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. You can catch every minute of this big playoff game and the Islanders' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Islanders. So maybe you've guessed it, but the player who has been struggling, who needs to step up his game, is Noah Dobson. And it hasn't just been in the playoffs. Really, it has been an overall season performance where Dobson, in the second half of last season, really, let's say February, March, and April, really picked up his game last year, and he just hasn't quite matched that performance over the course of this season. His numbers offensively, not bad, although not as good as he was down the stretch last year. But boy, in the playoffs and really overall in his own zone, he has struggled. 2 assists, no goals through 5 games. He is a +2, 10 shots on goal, which is not bad, but overall, he is not having the impact you want him to have. He has struggled to clear the puck out of his own zone. We've been talking about that constantly over the course of the playoffs and really over the course of the regular season as well. And look, let's face it, on the top power play unit, Noah Dobson is the quarterback of that unit. And I don't have to tell you how much the power play has struggled all season, but especially in the playoffs. Look, in this series so far, the Islanders are 1 for 15 on the power play, and they've also given up a shorthanded goal. So through 5 games, your power play has given up as many goals as they've scored. That is not a recipe for success if you are the New York Islanders. So clearly, Noah Dobson needs to step up. He needs to do better on the power play. He needs to do better in his own zone. Keep it simple. Look, Noah Dobson is a good skater. Him skating the puck out of the zone is not a bad idea, but the problem is Carolina's game, when you get the puck, they go to the guy who has the puck and pressure him right away, which means you have to actually pass the puck efficiently and smartly and make plays. And we need to see more of that from Noah Dobson on the power play. The puck has to move more, and the players who don't have the puck need to move more. There's a lot of things that need to improve about Noah Dobson's game. I don't expect significant changes from Dobson where all of a sudden he's going to go from the disappointment to Superman over the course of the last couple of games, game 6, hopefully game 7, if there's another series. I don't expect all of a sudden to flip a switch, but clean things up, do less harm, be efficient, be smart with the puck. It's almost like Noah Dobson's struggles personify the struggles of this team when they aren't playing well, and we've got to see more of that, more improvement in those areas from Dobson and from the Islanders if they hope to extend their season beyond tonight and even beyond Sunday's potential Game 7. As for the game tonight, and it is a big one, we know what they need to do. Be the more physical team, but don't take foolish penalties. When you do take penalties, kill them off. And on the power play, if you get a power play goal, that's a bonus, but do no harm on the power play. Don't give up shorthanded goals, obviously, and do not have the power play be an emotion killer where you're playing well 5-on-5, the power play comes out. It's so ineffective. You lose the momentum you had. They cannot afford to have that happen over the course of this game. They have got to be smart in their own zone and efficient with their exits and their breakouts. They've got to take advantage of the chances they get when they get them, whether it's Anderson or Ranta or Kochekov, whoever's in goal. You may only get 25 shots on goal against Carolina. You've got to take advantage of them. And obviously, the white whale, Ilya Sorokin. I don't know how he got that nickname, but anyway, Ilya Sorokin has got to be bringing his A game if the New York Islanders are going to pull off the W in Game 6. Again, Game 6 tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Islanders season on the line. You can catch every moment of this big playoff game with an Islanders hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Islanders. Time for our Islanders birthday of the day, and we're going to go back to a guy who had 2 stints with the Islanders, one in the late 90s and then a brief, very, very brief one in the early 2000s. And look, today is the 54th birthday of former Islanders forward Ted Donato. Donato, a Boston native, drafted in the 5th round by his hometown team, the Bruins, back in 1987, played 4 years at Harvard, and then joined the Bruins for the 91-92 season. He was a steady 20-goal guy for the Bruins, but by the time he joined the Islanders, midway through the 98-99 season, Donato was basically a checking forward. He played 55 games for the Islanders in 98-99, ended up scoring 7 goals, 18 points, 27 penalty minutes, and then was dealt to the Ottawa Senators, later played for the Ducks, the Stars, briefly for the Islanders again in 01-02, literally one game, then to the Blues, the Rangers, and back to the Bruins, where he ended his NHL career in the 03-04 season. Donato played in 796 career NHL games, had 150 goals, 347 points, 396 penalty minutes. You can add in 58 playoff games, 8 goals, 18 points, 22 penalty minutes. His best game as an Islander, we go back to the old Great Western Forum in Inglewood, California. the Islanders and the Kings, December 17th, 1998. And in that game, Ted Donato scored 2 goals for the Islanders on 4 shots, and the Islanders ended up beating the LA Kings in overtime by a score of 5-4. Brian Berard got the overtime game winner, but for Donato, he tied the game at 2-2 and then tied it again at 3-3 on a rare power play opportunity. So again, happy 54th birthday to former Islanders forward Ted Donato. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. Want to thank everyone for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day, everydayers. We're going to have a bonus episode again, as promised. It'll go live on YouTube Friday after the game. If the game is over on time, hopefully it'll be at midnight. But if the game goes into multiple overtimes, we'll push it back a little bit. Probably be somewhere around 30 to 45 minutes after the game ends. But make sure you join us for that. We'll break down Game 6 and hopefully be looking ahead to a Game 7 if the Islanders do end up winning. So make sure you join us for that. And everydayers, thank you so much for being there and keeping up with the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings every day. That does it for this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.